right. Okay, so welcome to this panel. It's Polkadot bridging crypto to the real world, one chain at a time. Thanks all for joining us, and thank you especially to our wonderful panelists. We have Ken Seiff, Managing Partner at Blockchange Ventures, Dan Reecer, VP of Growth at Acala, and Jay Goldberg, VP of Finance at Nodle. And so, this is about bringing Polkadot and blockchain tech to the mainstream. So why don't we start by going over, to have everyone on the same page, going over what Polkadot is, and if you can kind of each give your own explanation of what it is, because it really structures blockchain in a different way than it was done previously. So it might be kind of hard to at first understand how it actually works with parachains and all the rest. So whoever wants to take this first.
You go first.
The way I think about Polkadot stems from the need for it, and what it is stem from how the blockchain has grown up. Particularly in comparison to the internet, which the protocols of the internet were well established, if not perfect, very far along before companies were built on the protocols. And with the blockchain, we went the other way. We started with Bitcoin, which was both an application and a protocol. And to put that in context, imagine if someone came up with the idea for email at a time where there was no internet. They would have had to build the internet and the blockchain simultaneously into one application. And that's really what Bitcoin is. It's both an application and a protocol. And it became very valuable very quickly. And so it became very clear that because for the first time you could own a protocol, it was more financially rewarding to build a protocol than to build an application when there were no users and no protocols. And so very quickly we ended up in a world where the protocol and the application was split, first with Ethereum and then with many other efforts. And before long, we had very small teams building layer one protocols that led to a proliferation of protocols. And each of those protocols had systemic disadvantages. Some were slower, some were less secure, some were costly to use, some were all of that. So now we ended up in a world with small teams, lots of protocols, and protocols that, because of that, couldn't talk to each other. And this is where the need for some kind of interoperability connector to arrive. And that's really what Polkadot is. And so to put it in some additional context, if you can imagine a world where there were two internets instead of just one, and PayPal was built on one and eBay was built on the other, and they couldn't talk to each other, then it is quite likely neither of those companies would have become as big as they did. And so very early on in the development of all of these chains, Polkadot arose to create the connectivity between the various different chains. So I'll stop there and because I think that's just the beginning of what Polkadot is.
Yeah, I can just add to that. I've been talking about this for a couple of years now of what Polkadot is, and it's very complex, and you could go on for 20, 30 minutes about what Polkadot is, but at its very core, like Ken was saying, Polkadot connects chains together. The other thing Polkadot does is it secures blockchain. So as you know, with all these layer ones like Ethereum and Terra and Solana, you have to recruit your own set of validators, which is a lot of effort for the developers' teams. With Polkadot, why Acala chose to build on Polkadot and connect to Polkadot is because we inherit the proof of stake security that Polkadot offers. So we can focus on building our blockchain and our applications and an ecosystem, while Polkadot can handle the security of our network. The other thing is customization. So Gavin Wood built Ethereum, invented the Solidity programming language, but then went on to create Polkadot. But with Polkadot, he created Substrate, which is a blockchain development framework, and you can customize blockchains at the blockchain layer specifically for the use case that you're going for. So in our case, we're customizing Acala to be kind of optimal for DeFi applications, and in other cases, people are optimizing for gaming or NFTs or what have you. So I think those are a few things that I would just mention around what Polkadot is and why we chose to build in this ecosystem.
So I'm a practitioner. I'm going to give a very sort of practical example rather than try to explain Polkadot, because frankly, it's beyond my abilities. That's why I let you guys go first. At Nodle, we're building this massive wireless network. And one of the key elements we have is the fact that we have an app that lets anybody with a smartphone mine our coin. So anybody with a smartphone can mine a cryptocurrency. And for us, it's a really important part of what we do. And I can talk more later about Nodle in detail, but having this app and having this sort of software ecosystem where we have lots of people earning coins is really powerful for us. But it also has this, we're starting to get this to the point now where we have people with real solid amounts of coins in their Nodle wallets. And that poses a problem. What can they do with the Nodle? What can they do with that Nodle cash? And so we have some things in the works for later this year. And the first one we did, I can't get into the details, but it's pretty exciting and it's kind of cool. You can do something you can do on your phone. And it was built very traditionally. Like it took 2 or 3 months to paper the contract. It's going to take 4 or 5 months to do the engineering work. And it's a great thing, but it took a lot of work. And one of the many benefits for me of Polkadot is the fact that all of that becomes much easier, because suddenly now anybody I'm composable with, I can sort of plug into my app, and people can use their Nodle to do all kinds of things. So we're composable with Acala. That's the first one we've announced. We're talking to Kilt for a really interesting identity smart city project that could be a lot of fun too down the road. And there's all kinds of things that we can start looking at. It's pretty exciting. The options open to us.
Perfect.
If I could just add one thing, because I think one of the things that gets missed in 2021 is how early on we are. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of blockchains today. Projects like Ethereum have thousands of applications, but probably less than 5,000 applications being built on them. And it's extremely likely that in 10 or 15 or 20 years, there are going to be millions of applications that are built on top of blockchains. Given that 5,000 is built already, there's no such thing as a moat. There's no such thing as liquidity, because we're so early on in this process. And when you look at the biggest player in the space has 5,000 applications, and there are hundreds of blockchains already, the likelihood that we're even at inning 1 is pretty low. And so when you think about what has to happen for us to get there, the first thing is we have to have this underlying layer of protocols. And we don't have that today. Maybe as of last summer, we had a couple of blockchains that could transact at scale, right? Scale in this world today is always represented by Visa, who does 45,000 transactions a second. But when you start to look at social networks, for example, they're doing millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of transactions a second when you start to think about the likes and the comments and the forwarding. And so scale is not something the blockchain is even contemplating today compared to what it's going to need to address in the future.
Indication that there is no moat because we're so early. You're basically saying that the fact that Ethereum has had a head start and right now has the biggest developer community and the most liquidity, you think that's kind of easily, it's easy to overcome since...
Ethereum's done a number of things really well. I remember as recently as several months ago, one of the moats that people talked about with Ethereum was the NFT moat. Ethereum's so far ahead in NFTs. But we're seeing Flow and we're seeing Solana and seeing Polkadot begin to make, and other chains as well, not to just point those 3 out, make real dents in that moat. And it reminds me of 1996 to 1998, when AOL had such a monopoly on the portal market. The entire internet was really AOL-centric. And within 1 year, it had 8 competitors. And within 2 or 3 more years, it was dead. And I'm not predicting that for Ethereum, but what I am saying is its moat is not as safe as the world thinks.
Interesting. Okay. You both already touched a little bit on what each of your projects do, but if you can go into more detail on Acala and Nodle, maybe Dan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention about so what Polkadot is we've been describing it as a layer 0, because every parachain like Nodle, like Acala, and all the rest are all layer 1 chains, just like all the other layer 1s out there that we know well now. So Polkadot being a layer 0 that connects all these layer 1s, and then our parachain being a layer 1 for Acala, like I was mentioning, we've customized the blockchain itself for decentralized finance. So what that means is we've built a few products into the blockchain itself. So our stablecoin, the Acala dollar, is a decentralized stablecoin similar to a DAI that we expect to become kind of the de facto stablecoin of the Polkadot ecosystem. We've also built a liquid DOT staking product. So once Acala launches, you'll be able to stake DOT through Acala and get a liquid kind of receipt token for that. So your underlying DOT will continue earning staking returns, and then you'll have this liquid token, like you may have seen in Ethereum or Terra with these staking derivatives that you can go out and use to collateralize for a loan or to use in other DeFi use cases. The third product that we're building into the chain itself is our decentralized exchange. This can be comparable to like a Uniswap V2 type exchange, and the 3 of these products are built into the chain. So what that means is if you're a developer team looking to build in the Acala EVM, the EVM is built on top of our blockchain, and any DeFi application or any application in general can then plug into Acala's protocols at the blockchain layer through precompiled smart contracts through the EVM. So what that means is if you're an EVM-based application, say like an Aave or Uniswap, you can actually use the underlying decentralized exchange, the stablecoin, directly from the EVM to the substrate layer through the chain itself. Where I see this heading is we will have a lot of applications being built in the EVM. Unfortunately or fortunately, this is kind of where we are in the industry now. The EVM is kind of where everyone is using as this kind of mid-term step for building applications, because Ethereum does have such a huge developer community and just great traction and years of experience. But hopefully where this goes is, if you look at Gavin Wood's career path, he went from Ethereum to Polkadot and built Substrate. I don't think the ultimate vision is to have EVM be the end-all be-all. We need to move to a place where people are building native Substrate applications, people are coding applications with, let's say, Ink smart contract language once that's complete. And that's kind of where I think we're heading in the mid to longer term with Polkadot and Acala. Go ahead.
Interesting.
I was raising my hand not to interrupt, but saying we're doing that.
Oh, okay.
So, Substrate is actually one of the great Trojan horses of Polkadot. Because when the title of this is how do you get to 1 billion, of the session is how do you get to 1 billion users. And the first thing that's required to get to 1 billion users is to have really good applications. And when it takes a year to build a blockchain from scratch, building on top of a blockchain on top of Polkadot happens much faster. But building it with Substrate begins to happen really quickly. And so if you begin to think about what a competitive advantage it is to be able to knock up a blockchain really quickly, when you're a company and you want to do, not just build a blockchain, you just want to do a proof of concept to test something, speed is really valuable. And so what's going to happen, and I don't think we've seen this virtuous cycle really start yet, but what I believe will happen is that companies will start to just do very simple proof of concepts to test ideas out. And they're going to do it in the fastest place possible, which I think is Substrate. And if it works, then I think they do their pilot in the same place because the developers have grown accustomed to it. And if that works, then they've proven that something can scale, particularly when the validator and security is shared across many parties. And so while we're really, really early, I think the business design of Polkadot is really thoughtful in terms of accruing speed of development on top of the platform, and therefore a lot of development of simple proof of concepts, which is a leading indicator to what happens next.
Great. And one question on that, Dan, because I think what Acala is doing is just so ambitious. Like you're trying to do basically all of the biggest applications on Ethereum, but in one protocol, right? Like the Uniswap for Polkadot, the Maker for Polkadot. I mean, that's kind of, it's huge. Do you think the fact that it's easier and faster to build on Polkadot, is that what enabled you to take on like so many different areas?
Probably, because when the Acala team, I wasn't on the team yet, but when they were evaluating, do they build in the Ethereum ecosystem, Cosmos, Polkadot, I think part of it was the kind of modularity and customization of Substrate itself. So the main difference is we're building these products that are traditionally applications on Ethereum, but we're able to build them into the chain itself. So that's the value, is that all these applications are going to be able to plug into the liquidity of the primitives or the protocols themselves within our chain, instead of having to rebuild the liquidity on this application, and the like. The other thing that is, I think, very underappreciated about Polkadot and all the parachains is that we have this ability to fork our chains to upgrade our chains without a fork. Polkadot, last time I checked, it had upgraded the chain around 25 times since launch. It's only been launched for a year. This is 25 upgrades that would have required Ethereum to fork the entire network. Just the speed that you can innovate with that, and just being able to customize and just upgrade the chain without a fork is pretty unbelievable. And what this actually translates to, just one more thing, is when there's developers building, say, Ethereum compatible applications on Acala when we launch, what these developers can do is call up Brian Chen, who's a unbelievable Substrate developer on our team, and they can say, Brian, I wish we could do this, or I wish the chain did this. And Brian could actually build a module into Substrate, upgrade the chain, and the Acala chain itself is then upgraded based on a requirement from a developer at the application layer, which obviously you can't do that on Ethereum today. You can't just continue upgrading the chain. So that's going to be, I think, one thing to watch with Polkadot chains.
Yeah, I think for us, it's less about the speed. That's great. I think it's more about the flexibility to be able to add features and control our own roadmap in a way that I don't think was possible before.
And the speed matters in this war for domination. And the backward compatibility, which Dan, just to build on what Dan said, the backward compatibility of these upgrades is really very powerful. So once you do upgrade and it's seamless and there does not need to be a hard fork, it's backward compatible to all prior versions. And so the speed with which change can happen is likely to be orders of magnitude faster than in other environments.
I wonder if that's like a risk to centralization, if like projects can, is it like unilaterally upgrade their applications? I mean, the reason why it's done with a fork and with like all this consensus happening on Ethereum is to make it more, decentralized, resistant to corruption and, like malicious takeovers. Is that hard? Is that a risk for Polkadot to be able to be upgraded that quickly? And maybe Jay, you can weigh in.
I'm probably not the right person to get into the technicals of it, but I think there's enough protection built into the protocol with the way it is today that I think there's greater risk we see in a lot of other alternatives, right? I mean, for us, when we first started, we ran on Stellar, and Stellar's great. I don't want to throw any shade on them, but they're a very supportive partner, but they didn't they don't do what we needed to do. And for us, I remember going through our evaluation process of, all right, we're going to move off Stellar. What are we going to go to? And we looked through everything else. We looked through all the other alternatives, and it was very, very clear from very early on that Polkadot was the best platform, balancing security and centralization and governance and the whole list, and throughput, all those things. It was a pretty easy thing. So, yeah, I'm sure we could sit here and construct a hypothetical scenario. I'm sure there are lots of risks we all have to be careful of, but I think the real choice is between that and the alternatives, and I think Polkadot weighs that the best, comes out the best and all that.
Yeah, I think so someone asked on a call, I'm not technical enough to answer that question either, but someone asked on a call recently, like what would happen if there was a bug in an upgrade for one parachain? And can that affect the rest of the Polkadot network with all these connected parachains? The answer that Betty Chen on my team gave was that it's basically contained to the Parachain layer. So if there was a bug in the Parachain, it wouldn't be able to affect the relay chain or any other parachains. There's people actually I see in the room that could probably answer this question maybe after we're finished.
Oh yeah, and by the way, like there will be 10 minutes of questions, so write those down.
Yeah, so maybe we can get an answer from the back over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and then back to my initial question on getting deeper into both of your protocols. Jay, do you want to talk about Nodle?
Sure. So at Nodle, we're building the world's biggest wireless network, right? And wireless in the sense of the way that Verizon and AT&T build wireless networks, but they do person-to-person voice calls and stream HD videos to your phones. Nodle wants to connect all the things that can't be connected today, right? You've heard of things like the Internet of Things, which is the idea that we're going to connect 50 or 100 billion electronic devices to the internet. And I think that's good, that's part of what we do, but there's a much larger universe of things that we could all benefit from if we could connect them to the internet and to the power of software. And so, shipping pallets, packages, Coke cans, tools, like just adding up those, that's 1 trillion objects a year. And we have a way that can connect them to the internet at a radically lower cost than anything that's available today. And just going back to the theme here is when we started this, our founder Misha Ben-Alil came up with this really elegant solution for distributing the software and putting it on millions of devices. Our software that connects all these into a single network that lets us communicate with all those trillions of objects out there. And we took this idea to customers, and they were. They let us in the door because of the price and the economics. We'd solve this important problem. But then their first questions were, how do you do privacy and how do you do security? Right? And these are two linked problems. And we quickly realized that the only way to solve those was to do it on a blockchain. All right? If you had a centralized security model where all those trillions of devices had to go back to a central server, it just wouldn't scale, right? So I think it's important because it's not everything has to be built on a blockchain. But the way that what we want to accomplish at the scale we want to accomplish, it had to be built on a blockchain. And then we've been able to scale this up because we're now eventually we ended up on Polkadot, and we're able to now offer a platform for enterprises, for customers, for governments, anyone who wants to communicate with these trillions of remote objects out there, and run software on them and configure them and do two-way communications and build massive sensor networks and all kinds of really powerful applications that can unlock an immense amount of economic and societal value.
And this is a perfect example of the world being built one way, and then something changes, and the world is not constructed to adapt to it. You've got wireless communications networks and telephone networks, and they're built and require very expensive hardware to manage that communication and then service contracts. And when you have low-cost items that maybe could be Bluetooth enabled to send signals in one direction, those networks are way too expensive to manage that. But we all have Bluetooth enabled devices in our pockets that we're already paying for. And so you could imagine a pallet full of low-cost items that has one single Bluetooth sensor, or a truck with a single Bluetooth sensor, and as it drives by your car and you happen to have the Nodle app on your phone, the car can read that Bluetooth sensor, and the manufacturer or the trucker can then identify where its anonymous numbered Bluetooth sensor is. And they're probably, one of a handful of people who they've given permission to decode that. And so all of a sudden, the ability to find objects in real time or in near real time with one directional transmission enables us to build businesses that are fundamentally different or more accurate than exist today with our existing networks. And one example we were talking about with Nodle was just the package and shipping industry. When you go to track your package on FedEx or UPS today, it says in transit, it says in process. But with a simple platform and a wireless mesh network, you could literally know exactly where that package is at that very moment or 5 minutes before.
So to simplify greatly, is Nodle about getting devices which are like chips, or?
So the idea is that today we can communicate with anything that has electronics in it, anything that has a radio in it. So mostly that's Bluetooth, because everything has Bluetooth in it today. But we can do Wi-Fi, we can do cellular, like all the acronyms in telecom. We can connect to anything that will eventually be able to connect to anything with a radio in it. We're also getting to the point though where the cost of that Bluetooth radio is falling dramatically, and you'll be able to get a Bluetooth sticker for 25 cents that you can just put on a package. It's disposable. I mean, those are all coming soon, and we start taping those to things, taping those to everything, and suddenly everything is can be communicated with.
And I'll give you an example of where this can play out. 3 components put together. If you take a digital currency, you take a mesh network, and you take a smart contract, and you package them together, it's going to change the purchasing and shipping industry forever. So today, letters of credits get opened, packages get shipped, there's a bill of lading, there's an inspection report. When all of that gets transmitted successfully, which can often be a week after the shipment, then a letter of credit can be drawn on. You could literally see how an item with a Bluetooth transmitter on it, or on the pallet, gets to a warehouse in the United States, and instantly, because of a smart contract, that sends a signal to the smart contract, which triggers the payment in USDC or some other stablecoin. And all of a sudden, the flow of cash gets materially changed. The number of jobs and the types of jobs that are required to do that gets altered materially. And the speed and efficiency is going to be a new competitive threat and opportunity in just that one industry alone. And again, I'm not here to invent new businesses. These kinds of things, coupled with other technologies simultaneously, are going to reinvent a lot of the industries that exist today.
So that really sounds like science fiction. It's like very futuristic, like real objects connecting together to a blockchain and tracking all these things real time. For this panel, looking at what is the next step to bring blockchain to the next billion, what are kind of the things that can happen kind of next year, that like the use cases that are probably going to be live like in, I don't know, couple of few months on Polkadot that you think can scale to the masses, I guess?
So I have one that we've been noodling around with, no pun intended. So I mentioned before, like, you can use anybody with a smartphone can use that smartphone to mine our coin. We can take that a step further, where anybody can go out and buy, a little weather sensor, right? Again, the prices of these are very, very cheap. You can go out and deploy millions of little temperature, humidity gauges, and then through that build what would be this massive global micro level granular weather network. And I think the interesting thing about this is, one, you could it would all communicate over Nodle, but then what we would want to do is work with Acala and others to factionalize ownership of that, right? And so you have a distributed, it's DeFi, everybody could own a piece of that, or could own their own little local weather station. And I mean, this is $5, right, for one of these things. And then we would have this huge weather network, which we can then use for, it can be used for commercial purposes, because everybody likes to know what the weather is going to be on the other side of town. But it's also, I think, important for things like global warming, and monitoring environmental conditions, right? And all of that is, I mean, I could think of a way to construct that in today's telecom world, and it would be billions of dollars, and it would have to be like governments involved building it, very centralized. I think Nodle, which is 50 people, and Acala and a couple other people, could put that together fairly quickly, and it would be owned by everybody.
And it would transform, just as another example, transform climate insurance and crop insurance. Yeah. The billion people question is a really interesting one, because the very first thing that has to happen is the foundational layer has to be set. But once it's set, the speed with which things like this can happen is going to be transformative, way faster than the internet. Because when the internet began to be developed on, in order to use it, you had to have internet access. And that meant you had to wire homes. And that took a long time, and that was a gating factor. To use the blockchain also requires internet access, but we all have that. So the speed with which this is going to deploy, once the markets are ready, once the underlying infrastructure is ready, is going to be transformative. And I think you said it was sci-fi. I'll bet you what I described is happening in 36 months or less at least some kind of test scale. And I believe it will be happening at scale within 5 years. So sci-fi is getting pulled closer and closer. And the reason why it seemed like it's taken so long for real applications to happen is because we haven't had the protocols like Polkadot that can support this. And I think we're getting very close to being able to support real world cases like what Jay described.
Very cool. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to answer the same question, and actually Ryan Selkis asked Gavin Wood this morning at the end, and my answer is the same. For crypto to get to 1 billion people, and DeFi specifically, it has to not feel or look like crypto, to be honest. Crypto is very hard to use. My parents would not be using Polkadot.js, if you guys know Polkadot.js. We need user interfaces and applications that are easy to use and feel like using Venmo or a bank. An example of this on the Acala side, we announced probably 3 months ago or so. If you're in New York, you probably know Current. Current.com is a fintech company. A couple months ago, they were blasted all over the subway system here. They are a fintech company that actually started in crypto. They were trying to build on Ripple after leaving Morgan Stanley. And then they asked themselves, how do we get crypto in the hands of millions of people? The answer is don't build in crypto, build in fintech. So they built a fintech application, which is a savings account application for about 3 million young Americans. They're based in the US. And they came to us asking, how do we integrate with Acala and Polkadot to bring DeFi yield to our users without them needing to know that crypto is even involved? So what this is going to look like, extremely exciting, is one day, it hasn't been actually kind of fully defined as what they'll call the product or what it'll look like, but for example, what it'll look like one day, that you're a savings account person getting 0.5% interest. You open up Current one day and a little pop-up comes up and it says, would you like to sign up for our 3.5% interest yield account? Yes, sounds great. So you start putting in 50, 100 bucks a month. What's actually happening in the background is these dollars are going to flow out of Current through an on-off ramp into Acala, converted into the Acala dollar, sent into Acala into this yield engine that we're building with dot staking returns, Compound. We got a grant from Compound to build a bridge to their chain. Other forms of yield. As this yield is earned, it'll be liquidated back into AUSD, converted back into dollars, distributed to Current customers, and they're all of a sudden getting 6 times more returns than they were with their previous savings account. That's a DeFi backend, fintech front end. People don't even need to know that Acala or Polkadot or crypto is even involved. Of course, they can look into it, but that is one example that's actually being built right now. Most likely launched hopefully in the next 6 months. And that's going to be live in the US very soon. So
and that probably, things like that are probably the first gateway to 1 billion users. There are so many people without banking accounts and without credit. And so instead of putting yourself in the frame of mind of when does this hit our world in the United States, think about how much pain you would be willing to endure to have a loan in a country where you have no credit, in a place where you have no credit, all of which is enabled with mobile banking. And so we don't even have to be perfect in the third world. We just have to be functional. And so I think that's the first place where we're going to see real mass adoption, is in the banking and lending and credit side of this business. And it's going to be very simple applications that roll out first.
Super interesting. Okay, so getting to the billions involves fintech plus DeFi, involves connecting with real world assets, and you're all betting this will happen in the next year or so. anyone have any questions on things that we said in the panel? Anyone want to explain the upgrading issue on Polkadot as well? Feel free. Over there.
Sorry, my name's Killer Cathcart. I just have a quick question. I mean, it looks like in this kind of new world with multi kind of layer one protocols that are being bridged by protocols such as Polygon, it's sort of like the internet of the 1990s and early 2000s, where you have TCP/IP or HTTPS kind of open protocols that are bridging individual web servers or web applications. So how do you think about the kind of proprietary closed source, or at least closed ecosystem nature of Polygon in this context, as it's differentiated from sort of the more open protocol that bridged different entities in the original internet?
I didn't hear the question. Did you guys hear the question? Can you hold the mic up to your mouth and ask the question just a little bit louder?
Okay, yeah, so, oh, whoa. I guess the question was about basically the proprietary nature of the Polygon ecosystem or the Polygon protocol as a bridge between different entities in the new virtual environment on Web3, as it differentiates from some of the more kind of industry standard or internationally recognized protocols such as TCP/IP or HTTP that bridged different entities on the original internet. Like how does one as a user in Web3 kind of handle the fact that this sort of inter-protocol layer is actually itself a proprietary for-profit entity? Does that make sense? And how do we handle competition between those different layer one protocols?
I'm not sure I understand that.
I don't even know how to.
I mean, again, I'm not the right person to ask about Polygon. I think I heard that what you're asking, but I mean, if the question is, are there protocol layers in this that are going to be proprietary? And I think that the history of software is always going back and forth between different parts that are centralized or proprietary and others that are open. And I think it's very hard to have something that's. I mean, we always have to balance those trade-offs, and I think that's the ultimate success is not whether one part or another is. I mean, there's always going to be something that's somewhat centralized or somewhat proprietary. That's another way to say that there's somebody there is adding value. And in general, in crypto, in blockchain world, anything that really becomes obstructive to the whole process can eventually be removed. Right? So if you're not adding value and the protocol is dying or just stagnant, I think the rest of the ecosystem is flexible enough to move around that.
Hello. Okay. How does the Polkadot ecosystem incentivize teams like Nodle or Acala to build on them? And what are the partnerships there aside from just pure usage and utility?
First, I'll just add that Polkadot is a protocol, so there's no. If anyone says they're partnering with Polkadot, it's a lie. There's no such thing as a partnership with Polkadot because it's just an open platform for us to build blockchains on. In terms of incentivizing us, I think we've been incentivized through tech quality. We came to build on Polkadot because of everything that I explained before, the ability to customize, build the blockchain exactly how we want, and be able to have essentially a future-proof blockchain platform because we can continue to improve it over time. There's no financial incentives or anything like that around building on Polkadot. It's just that we wanted to build with the best tech that there is, and really it's kind of just that.
Yeah, that was our journey too. Is our engineers came up with our blockchain architect Elliot, who really is deep into this, came up with this solution. He wanted to go down Polkadot. He reached that conclusion for purely technical reasons, long before we got into partnering or any support or anything like that. And so, that was our first and foremost.
I do think we're entering an era where, at least for the last 6 years, 7 years, technology has led the way. I think it's quite likely as the blockchain becomes more commercial, more traditional companies begin to build on it, the technology becomes more usable, that to win is going to require commercial sensibility and technical excellence, and that it'll be some combination of those two things that drives the ultimate winners from this point on. And so I think while incentives may not be the thing that ultimately leads the commercial sensibility charge, things like better product, better UX, better access to the talent for support and help are going to become critical differentiators. Even developer tools will become critical differentiators in the technology that wins. And it may be that a really, really good technology with extraordinary commercial sensibility becomes an equal competitor to the best technology in the world. And we've seen that for the last 20 years in other industries, and I think it's likely to play out here too.
Okay, so I have a very fundamental question. Blockchains are supposed to be this data layer for the entire world. And it has been the hardest. As storage is expensive, transactions take so long, and that's more than just Ethereum, it's every blockchain. It's just an aspect of it. So how does Polkadot solve for being the data layer? But very curious.
Being a little what?
How does Polkadot solve for being the data layer?
I guess, so one thing that I wanted to say in the beginning that I didn't say is like what Polkadot is not. So Polkadot is not a layer 1 blockchain, and Polkadot is not a smart contract platform. So you don't build applications on Polkadot. What Polkadot does is, what I was saying in the beginning, is it secures blockchains and it connects blockchains. So as Polkadot as a data layer, I would maybe argue that the data layers are probably going to be more at the Parachain layer. And if it's a Parachain for IoT devices or for any other sort of data, the good thing with Substrate is you can build the chain specifically for that use case. But that's just kind of the bottom line, I guess, is that Polkadot is really a low-level infrastructure that's connecting a bunch of blockchains together. You're not going to be storing data on Polkadot itself.
Yeah, and Jenny, I'm not sure that saying that the blockchains are the data layer is going to be the answer in 5 years. I think at a minimum, we're going to be saying blockchains are smart contracts, and they're going to be doing an awful lot more stuff, of which data is a component. I think if you dumb down the internet to what it really is, it's allowing data to transfer frictionlessly between two entities. If you dumb down the blockchain to what it is at its base layer, it's allowing value to transfer frictionlessly between any two entities. And so data is a piece of that. Valuable data is a larger piece of that. But the validator piece, the security piece, the smart contract layer, we just haven't seen it yet because it's so early on. So I think what actually is going to distinguish blockchains from each other in 5 or 10 years is their ability to move massive amounts of value securely and frictionlessly. And so I think it's much more than just that one definition.
Dan, this is going to be a question for you. Acala is obviously going the super app route. What are the advantages you see on like the product and UX side with having all these different primitives on one platform versus fragmented?
All the what on one platform?
All the different primitives, so like trading, borrow, lend.
I think there's several. One thing that we were using even for Karura, just like calling it an all-in-one hub. If you look at like the comparable products that are built on Ethereum, you go to Maker to do one thing, you go to Compound to do another thing, you go to Aave to do another, and you're hopping from one site to one site. The benefit of building in an environment like Acala is that you're essentially you're doing everything in one place without having to do all these bridging and cross-chain transfers, which you even have to do between parachains. Hopefully it gets easier, but I think the benefit is that once you bridge, for example, your BTC over, you collateralize that for a loan, and then you're using that within an application built on Acala, say one of the EVM compatible applications. The benefit is it's all in one place, so you're using all your tokens in the same place pretty seamlessly. But I guess to take that one level deeper is in the Polkadot ecosystem in general, there's still going to be pretty simple cross-chain applications built between parachains. An example of that is like, let's say for example, there's a cross-chain application being built. Part of it's using the Acala dollar and the Acala blockchain. Part of it's using Nodle. Part of it's using Moonbeam. The user doesn't even really need to know that there's 3 parachains interacting with one application. You're using your either Polkadot.js or hopefully soon Talisman, the new wallet coming, and you're just interacting with the application all in one environment without dealing with these bridges.
You know, Acala is a perfect example. In 5 years from today, somebody's going to look back and say, duh, because the question that Acala asked that nobody has asked up until now was, is this a product or a feature for the prior DeFi protocols? And really, they were features, not the product. Yeah. And when you put them all together, that's the product. And it may not be obvious today, but when we saw it, for example, it became pretty obvious to us that that was the question we should have been asking for the last couple of years as this industry was maturing. I don't know how it's going to play out, but it's a really smart team that built a single product that can do an awful lot of things that don't need to be done in disparate products. So my guess is that this is going to become the model for the future, and other DeFi projects may have to play catch up. And if you're not designed from the ground up, it may be hard to play catch up.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, sure. I'll ask. So I'm interested in the commercial viability problem I see here. So one of the big critiques that I see a lot of times when I'm talking about Polkadot is that things like IBC are a lot more open. People can build on Cosmos more effectively without having to run seek effectively to raise money to get on the platform and to operate. So what I'm interested in is, what are some approaches maybe that you see within the space, whether on Kusama or on Dot, that like are lowering the cost ceiling, lowering the cost floor to be able to bring in these commercial projects without having to raise a significant capital in order to execute right off the bat?
You know, I don't know that I agree with the assumption. Yeah. I don't know that raising significant capital is actually how I would describe it. We own a lot of Polkadot tokens. We stake those tokens. We now have an alternative to staking, which is to lock them up in the Parachain auctions. We still own those tokens. We still get revenue. And the projects don't have to do anything more than issue some of their own tokens, which would be fundamentally the same as raising capital, but it's a relatively easy process that the system, the Polkadot system, designed very well and works, I believe, very well. It's still early on. So I'm not sure that I would agree with the assumption, but the one thing I would say is that it's not a single component that's going to determine this, who wins and what works. It's the entire system that gets designed. And one of the things that makes for a low-cost operation is the speed to deploy. And the parachains dramatically speed the deployment of the validator network and the security. Substrate dramatically speeds the development of a blockchain. The better the technology you build on, the more powerful the business you build on top of it can be, and the faster and better it can scale. We're in the early stages right now. I think this is the first inning for layer one protocols, maybe the second inning. And we're hearing Polkadot be described as a layer 0 that sits underneath it. So even the systemic design of how the blockchain is going to work is still not set. Come back in 5 years, and I think it's going to be really clear. So I think the speed at which this happens is going to be pretty fast.
The only other thing I'll add is if you were referring to raising money as in like raising dots for these crowd loans in order to launch, so so technically we're not raising money in the traditional sense. None of that actually goes to the team. Yes, there's a lot of work that goes into it to get the dots contributed, and then you have to, of course, lock those. But it's going to be really interesting to watch how it plays out, because there's a chance that it's going to be like this. These first slots are so coveted and everyone wants to launch, but after there's, say, 15, 20, 30, the total amount of dot could eventually start going down, and then it becomes much easier to just go in. I'm hoping that in 2 years when Acala is renewing our slot that it'll be a little bit more reasonable in terms of the amount of DOT, but we'll just have to see how that plays out.
And there is something called a parathread, which effectively is NetJets for a parachain. And so I think there are lower cost alternatives for people who don't need to operate on top of the network at high scale. And so there's this opportunity to have both a minor leagues and a major leagues. And candidly, there's Kusama also. And so we may see some people who can't afford Polkadot build on top of Kusama or build on a parathread. So the system is not fully designed. The blockchain, what is going to win in the blockchain, forget about Polkadot for a second, but the infrastructure of the blockchain hasn't been set yet. There's different theories about how it plays out. This is a particularly interesting one to us.
Yeah, and the auction strategy, like everyone's forming their own strategies and how to approach it. If you're talking about like corporate entities coming in and trying to get a parachain slot, I'm sure there's a totally different way they'd be thinking about it, whether it's self-funding it, if they're sitting on $50 million and they can just buy a bunch of DOT and launch, that's much easier for them versus doing this crowd loan, which is kind of more crypto native or blockchain native, where we want to involve 50, 100,000 people in the process. So it's really everyone's kind of learning as we go.
How much are the slots right now, roughly, DOT?
It hasn't started yet. So that's the next kind of thing we're all waiting for, is for the parachain auctions to start on Polkadot. No idea how to guess on that. On Kusama, they've been, the recent ones are like 220,000 KSM, so it's a lot. I think maybe 200 million.
Anyone else?
We had the one question about like how do we prevent bugs in an upgrade on a parachain from impacting the relay chain and other parachains. I don't know if any of the Web3 or parity people are able to answer that. That'd be awesome. But if not, it's fine.
My question there was like how to avoid centralization and censorship risk if applications are upgraded so seamlessly without the need of like getting consensus.
I'm not sure that I was here for the full question, but like bugs on parachains, generally speaking, will not impact the relay chain or other.
Yeah, we were talking about like forkless upgrades and how if one parachain had an issue during an upgrade, how it would not affect the rest of the.
Generally correct, yes.
I just didn't know like how.
So like they're sovereign blockchains, right? They're just authoring blocks to the relay chain. So if there's an issue with that parachain and it's not authoring blocks,
so the validators would just reject it?
Yeah, I mean, the validators would not be authoring those blocks to the relay chain, and that parachain community would have to go through their own governance process to fix the bug within their own sovereign chain, and then continue syncing to the relay chain. Just to say, oh, sorry, one last piece. I mean, this is ongoing FUD from Ethereum and Cosmos teams about parachains. It's like this idea, oh, there's a malicious parachain. What's it going to do? It's basically bullshit.
All right. Great. Okay. I think that wraps it up. We're way over time anyways. So
thanks,
yeah,
everybody.
thanks everyone for coming, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.